Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So as we saw in this week's episode, Jane Don't was shockingly eliminated. She had the best track record of the season and arguably one of the best the franchise has ever seen. She was in the top for 10 consecutive weeks, had 3 Maxi Challenge wins, and then she landed in the bottom once and got eliminated. I think that Jane's elimination is going to define how a lot of people see this season, and not just the season itself, but the wider competition and Drag Race going forward. So in this video, I'm going to go through what Jane has said about her elimination, what the fan reaction has been, but also whether I think it's fair and whether track record should be taken into account. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Also, if you enjoy these types of videos and want to see more of them, please make sure you smash that subscribe button because it really does make a big difference. Okay, so let's start with what Jane has said about the situation. What I find most interesting about Jane's elimination isn't really what happened on the episode because we all watched it. It's what Jane has said afterwards because she's made some really interesting comments in her exit interviews. Jane recently did an interview with Blavity and she said that, for example, the Karen challenge, which was this week's challenge, was easily her least favourite of anything they were asked to do. Jane said, quote, "Not to be the serious person at a clown show, and I'm not making any kinds of excuses about my performance in the challenge. It was what it was regardless of the topic. But I guess to my mind, I just don't think those Karen videos are fun or funny. I think they're symptomatic of a lot of bleep that I really don't like. I don't think it's funny. I don't think that white people being nasty, racist, and underhanded is funny. I just don't think that white women being entitled and crazy is necessary. I don't watch them and laugh. They just make me uncomfortable. So it's difficult for me to go into the challenge and try to find a lot of humor in it, which is why I took the direction that I did, which was to sort of make her almost like a Christopher Guest kind of character. I don't know, Karens are just not interesting to me. I don't mean to condescend the material that we were given, but it just didn't resonate with me." Jane also said that she connects those Karen videos to the 2020 racial reckoning and the George Floyd murder, and she just couldn't find the comedy in it. But the more revealing thing that Jane said, I think, was that she said the judging has become, quote, graded on a curve. She said other queens were getting critiques like, quote, "We were worried about you, but you did pretty well." Whereas for Jane, her critiques had become things like, quote, "For you, we have a certain expectation and you could have done more." So I think what Jane was saying is she didn't just feel like she was competing against 4 other queens, she also felt like she was competing with her own track record and the judges' perception of her. Another important thing Jane said was her track record didn't make her feel more secure. If anything, it made her more anxious because the higher the bar gets, the harder you fall when you finally stumble, and she only had to stumble once. In another interview, Jane described the whole process of her being eliminated as, quote, out of body. She didn't see the other queen's scenes, didn't watch her own one back, and was left with basically no context for why she was the one going home. And she's had a year to sit and think about this, and she still can't fully make sense of it. Another thing people have also pointed out is that Jane won the Rusical this year, so they think that she fell for the Rusical curse. For those of you who don't know, for about the past 8 years or so from season 6 onwards, the queen who won the Rusical almost never won the entire season. For example, Courtney Act, Ginger Minge, Chi Chi DeVayne, Shea Coulee, and others. The curse was only really finally broken on international seasons. So the fact that Jane won the Rusical and then got eliminated means for some people she did fall victim to the supposed Rusical curse, if you believe in those sorts of things. But now let's get into the fan reaction of Jane's elimination because it's been massive. Twitter and Reddit exploded after the episode. People were calling Jane one of the most robbed queens in the history of the show. And the main thing driving this outrage, I think, is the contrast. This was Jane's first time in the bottom 2 all season. She had been low the week before, but not the bottom 2. Whereas Nene Coco, who beat Jane in the lip sync, was in the bottom for the 2nd time in a row. And similarly, Juicy Love Dion has survived 3 bottom placements so far. So fans were now asking, how is it fair that the frontrunner stumbles once and she's immediately eliminated while other queens get chance after chance? There's also been a lot of suspicion about production, thinking that they eliminated Jane to give her a storyline to come back to All Stars as the most robbed queen in history. Whereas other people have pointed out that the lip sync editing barely showed Jane, which made it impossible for viewers to judge whether she actually lost the lip sync or not. But I think this brings us on to the wider issue of should track record matter? The debate around Jane's elimination I don't think is actually about Jane. I think it's about the fundamental question the show has never properly answered, which is, should track record matter? In the interest of being balanced and fair, because as we know, I am Drag Race Switzerland, I'm going to argue both sides because I think that's the best way to do it. I think the biggest argument for her elimination being fair is straightforward. It's called a lip sync for your life, so either you win it or you don't. You could also argue that track record has never been an official tiebreaker. Jane herself has even said she was the weakest in this week's challenge, and Nene did genuinely do better than her in the lip sync. If you start saving frontrunners from the lip syncs just because of their track record, I think the whole format could lose its stakes. For example, last week, Naisha brought up at Roscoe's she was playing devil's advocate, and she said that, for example, in sporting competitions like the Football World Cup, it doesn't really matter how many games each team has won or how well they scored. Once they get into the final, whoever wins the final wins the entire competition and the trophy, so should it be the same for Drag Race? But here's the flip side of the argument saying that Jane's elimination was not fair. You could argue that track record should carry more weight than it currently does, and I think Drag Race has a real problem with the way it handles this subject. Because the show can't have it both ways. Throughout the season, they've been building up this narrative of Jane's historic run, with queens like Mikey Meeks and others literally mentioning that Jane is good at everything and celebrating how she's dominated the competition. But you can't then act like none of this matters the first time the queen is in trouble. You could argue that it's not a competition, that's just a TV show pretending to be a competition when it suits them. And this isn't a new subject, I think this is an ongoing pattern at this point. For example, a lot of people have drawn conclusions with Susie Toot on season 17. She had 2 wins, 0 bottom placements throughout 13 episodes, broke the franchise record for the most consecutive weeks without landing in the bottom, and was sent home 1 episode before the finale, which kind of sounds similar to Jane. In fact, I saw on social media that a user named @Wakema created a graphic comparing Jane and Susie's track records when they got eliminated, and even the fact that they both got eliminated while wearing red. Other examples include Manila Luzon on All Stars 4. She had 3 challenge wins and the best track record, and then was eliminated by Naomi Smalls in a twist which is still talked about to this day. However, this was slightly different because Manila was eliminated due to the All Stars rules twist rather than the judges. And then Shea Coulee dominated season 9, but then lost to Sasha Velour's Rose Petals in the Lip Sync SmackDown twist, which was the first season to introduce this twist. And although these situations are very different, I agree, I do think that there is a common theme throughout them. The show clearly builds up a frontrunner, then the format of the show eliminates them, whether it's a jury vote, a twist, or just a single bad performance. And every time, it defines the season more than whoever actually wins. I think Jane's elimination may do the same thing for season 18. For example, are people actually going to remember and celebrate who does win season 18? Or are they only going to remember that Jane should have won season 18 in their opinion? I'm also not saying though that I think that Jane should automatically have been saved, but I am saying that when you have a queen who has been in the top for 10 straight weeks and it's her first time in the bottom, compared to a queen who's been in the bottom twice in a row, maybe the judging does need to account for that. Because you could argue that right now, the message Drag Race is sending is, it doesn't matter how well you do, all that matters is the one performance you don't do well in, and is that fair? So where does that leave us going forward? I think this whole issue brings up something that is quite important, which is fans' trust in the show. When viewers feel like a season is being manipulated for storyline purposes rather than being judged fairly, engagement I don't think becomes more enthusiastic, it becomes more cynical. For example, this latest episode now has the lowest rating on IMDb of any US episode in history. The only wider Drag Race episode that has a lower rating is from Global All Stars, and I think that speaks for itself. I also think Jane had a really interesting take on this. In an interview with Gold Derby, she talked about what she called the quote, robbed industrial complex, which is this cycle where fans get outraged, the Queen comes back on All Stars, and then it repeats itself. She said she'd much rather fans channel that energy into something constructive, like buying tickets, merch, and supporting the Queens. She also added that screaming on the internet is lovely for what it is, but she wants it turned into something more positive. And while I do think that this is a very classy response from Jane, I do think it sort of lets the show off the hook. This so-called robbed industrial complex only exists because the show keeps creating robbed queens, and if the competition did feel fair, there would be nothing to be outraged about in the first place. Other people have also pointed out that in more recent years, Drag Race seems to do things just to create a buzz or a stir on social media, but often it gets talked about for a week or so, but then the rest of the season suffers because of this decision. But I think you could also argue that this is a positive thing as well. This elimination has generated more buzz than anything else really so far on the season, because so far a lot of people feel like season 18 has been a little bit underwhelming. So from a pure attention standpoint, you could say that Jane's elimination worked, but I don't think that's sustainable. Controversy gets people talking, but it doesn't keep them watching long term if they feel like the outcome of the show is predetermined. Regardless, I do think this is going to define how season 18 is remembered, and I also think Jane Don't will be back on All Stars sooner rather than later, but if she does come back, I hope they do it in the right way. You could also say that I am completely overanalyzing the show and it is just a fun show, so does it really matter? I kind of would agree with that. I like arguing both sides, so I'm leaving it for you to decide. So there you go. There were my thoughts on Jane Dote's elimination and whether it was fair or not. But let me know in the comments what you think, because I'd love to hear it. Do you think Jane's elimination was fair because it's a TV show and it's whatever makes good drama? Or should track record actually matter, and does it undermine the competitiveness of the actual show itself? If you'd like to get early access to my videos as well as exclusive content, please check out my Patreon. It's a cheap way to support the channel and it does go a long way, and I'll put a link to that in the description. Also, thank you so much to my amazing Patreon members, both new members and existing members. You are all absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for being such amazing supporters. I love speaking to you in the group chat and all the other things. Honestly, you are such lifesavers. Thank you all so much. Please make sure you like and comment on these sorts of videos to help boost them in the algorithm and get them promoted to more people. And smash that subscribe button to help the channel out, because it really does make a big difference. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me in the future for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. Thank you so much. Bye.